And welcome to The What Show, a show where we dissect the ins and outs of social, economic, business and money matters of Malaysia and Southeast Asia. And welcome back to part 2 of today's interview. Thank you very much to Faris Saad, New Straits Times business journalist, who was with us in the earlier episode. So right now, we're just going to spend a little bit more time with Faris to understand a little bit more about what GLCs have been up to lately.
Okay, so today's topic is a tad sensitive, and I would say what we are trying to do here is really understand and explore why government-linked companies exist and how are they performing in the current time and age, especially in a world which is post-COVID, post-crisis. So maybe to start things off, Faris, if you can share with me, why are GLCs important in Malaysia and how are they faring in a world post-COVID-19?
I think possibly like a lot of the weight of the economy, GDP, is basically carried by a lot of SMEs lah.
Yep.
And probably after that would be GLCs. Because if we look at Bursa Malaysia, there's about 47 GLCs listed. That makes up about only 5% of total listed companies, but they carry about 40%, more than 40% of total market cap for the Bursa. So we can see, in terms of scale, how big their influence is.
Go into the next question. In the GLC, we know that one of the substantial stakeholders is the government, followed by who appoints this management team. So ultimately, who makes the decision to execute certain programs or execute certain business decisions? Is it the government or the management?
I'm going to be really blunt here, all right? At the end of the day, the government makes decisions because it depends on who is at the top management. And who decides who sits on the top management? The government.
So top management of the GLC, meaning the CEO or whatnot. Ultimately, that CEO is acting on behalf of the government.
Maybe not the CEO, because you've seen CEOs basically, there's a mixed bag. In terms of appointment, you can see CEOs appointed based on merit and performance. And you've also seen CEOs that are appointed a little bit, questionable. Yeah. So the CEOs might want to, there's a certain amount of autonomy that these CEOs have, like in terms of business decision making. Like they can make, of course they have their shareholders' interests in mind, the stakeholders. And they want to make the companies as profitable as possible, because what's the point of having a company if you don't want to make profits, right?
True.
But then whatever decisions they make has to be green lighted by the other board members as well. And that includes people that are appointed by the government. And we can see this in the sense that some CEOs of some companies, like I won't name names specifically, want to have a sense of increased transparency and better corporate governance, because for you to be able to compete at an international level with international companies, you need to be transparent and you need to have some kind of sustainability plan in place. And they want to execute those, but are unable to do so at 100% capacity because they are being held back by certain key decision makers within the company itself.
So in that sense, these key decision makers are the unseen hands or seen hands? Do they willingly know that in order to achieve this, I need to take this decision, but this may not go well with the directive given by my board of directors or by the government?
See, there's a lot of questionability in this sense, because you see some people appointed to the boards of big GLCs that are there because of political clout. Yeah, because I believe recently it was mentioned in Parliament that they would take for granted that a lot of MPs who aren't currently doing anything will get nice cushy jobs in GLC companies, nice cushy directorship positions.
We would love one of those.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That would be a very nice corner office at KLCC.
We are definitely going into politics. It's a shortcut way to get a nice cushy, C-suite position. Yeah, and So that affects decision making in a sense because there's always going to be political interest.
Okay.
Now I'm 100% for separating business interests with political interests. I don't believe that those two should ever
Come together.
mix. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it will, like say we've seen changes in government so many times over the past few years, right? Yeah, and because these companies are so linked to the whatever current government is in administration.
Yeah.
Whenever there's a change in government, it will definitely affect corporate performance and stuff and we don't want that. As minority shareholders, you don't want to see that.
So in that sense, would it be safe to say that GLCs are not as competitive as compared to privately owned companies or publicly listed non-GLC companies?
There's a sense of protectionism around these GLC companies. If you look on the one hand, you kind of need this protectionism because you need to keep the market afloat somehow.
Yeah.
Because they make up a huge chunk of the market, you need to make sure that the market stays healthy. So this protectionism helps in a way, but of course, with this, there's no such thing as no strings attached kind of protectionism, right? So to a certain extent, these companies are held back from being the 100% competitive companies that we need to see. Like an example would be TM. Like I'm just gonna go out straight out and say TM.
Okay. Could you explain more?
Well, how's your internet connection at home, by the way, if you're using TM, right? Like, we want to be an advanced economy in the sense that we want to have super fast internet. We want to be as fast as South Korea, but we are still comparing our internet speeds to neighboring countries like Cambodia, Laos. Why are we still comparing our speeds to that? Why are we not comparing it to Japan or South Korea if we truly want to be 100% competitive? And this is, of course, if you want to be 100% competitive, you have to be able to make the decisions 100% in the interest of the shareholders and the company itself without any political connections.
So you mentioned that these CEOs, they are appointed by the government. So what is their terms of employment? Because, hey, I would like to be one too.
They're contract-based.
Yep, okay. So they're contract-based.
Yeah, and the contracts are usually for shorter terms than you would see for companies that are non-GLC. Yeah, and it's, of course, to give credit to these CEOs, their performance is rated on KPI and all that. But are they in it for the long term? Are they in it for the long-term goals of the company, the long-term interests of the company and its shareholders? If they're only in it for a short term, we need to look at sustainability of a company in terms of performance. So whoever is appointed as a CEO of a company, MD of a company, needs to have really long-term goals for the company in order to have it perform sustainably.
But how can you have a long-term goal when, for example, this particular GLC, they had a new CEO after the change of government, and then he was there about less than 2 years. Then there was another change of government and he was asked to leave. So whatever goodwill or initiative that he wanted to put in was he only managed to execute it for 1.5 years at max. Then he was asked to leave, or the contract was cancelled. Then you put in a new guy. So how do you plan a sustainable business when change of management is at max every 2 years, every 3 years?
You can't. No matter how hard you try, like these CEOs, I'm sure they have all really good intentions. They want to perform well. They want their credentials to look good, but they can't because for factors that are beyond their control.
Yeah.
We don't know when we're going to have another change in government, for example, after this.
True.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the point where, okay, for example, we're still using the CEO as an example. CEO change, the secretary remains, the company division heads still remain because they are employed by the company. They are not political appointees. So whenever there's a change in the boss or CEO, they are suddenly left the company, and the staff members, they are left in a lurch where do I listen to the new boss? Do I listen to the old boss? Because the old boss gave me a new mandate before he left, and there's a new boss with a new mandate. Then the question is, am I serving the organization and trying to achieve the organizational goals, or am I trying to, as a staff, do whatever my boss tells me, which is the CEO? That's the big question right there.
On a macro scale, you can see how this affects the company's performance. Yeah, there's constant changes in management and constant changes in directions, and then each time there's a new CEO coming, it's like, oh, I have a new 5-year plan. Let's scrap the previous 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And then you go further down on a micro scale. You get to see the motivation of employees being affected, because they're not sure what direction they're going in. They're like, oh, give 100% for this particular plan. I like it. And then suddenly there's a change in management, and all their previous efforts are scrapped, and they have to start from the beginning again.
Yep.
Because this new CEO wants to make a good impression and come up with fancy catchphrases and stuff through ad campaigns and all that.
And a new song, lagu tema baru.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all for part 2 of today's interview. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to also comment and leave your questions below. We will try to answer each and every one of your questions. So look out for part 3 in the following weeks. See you!